the focus for cellular respiration right now for us is aerobic, and we said that means with oxygen. So if we're going to harvest energy or convert energy from a chemical form in a macromolecule to something that your cells can use, we've got a lot of process to go through. But we want to keep it fairly simple and applied for you. We start with photosynthesis. Photosynthesis actually has nothing to do with you directly. Photosynthesis, of course, being in plants and converting light energy or sunlight into the chemical form, primarily glucose or some sort of sugar. And this idea of processing carbon dioxide and water with light and getting sugar and oxygen is our basic photosynthetic reaction. Cell respiration, on the other hand, takes sugar and oxygen and produces carbon dioxide and water. No, you don't produce any light, sorry, but you do produce heat. So this cellular respiration process occurs in our mitochondria in the eukaryotes, and while prokaryotes or bacteria do cell respiration, they do it a little bit differently because they don't have mitochondria, right? We've talked about that. So they have to do the process a little bit differently, but they're still going to do the same basic process of breaking down a sugar into CO2 and water. Now, in this process, our hope is that we do this efficiently and that your cell is able to capture some of that energy from the breaking of the sugar bonds and actually store it as ATP. So what we're going to look at is, rather than burning glucose like we would making something in the kitchen, if you burn sugar in the kitchen, it releases heat and energy very quickly. That is not an efficient way or an effective way for you to store energy. So we have to take that and very methodically break down that glucose, and with every step store as much energy as we can. And so that stored energy or potential energy is in the form of ATP. And eventually we'll get to use that ATP to do some work, but in the meantime, we have to think about how we can actually get this ATP formed. So our focus for cell respiration is, how do we form ATP and how much can we make? Remember, as I mentioned to you, breathing, the physical act of breathing, bringing air into your lungs and expelling air back out again, is not cell respiration. In order for you to be able to do that, you have to do a lot of cell respiration in advance so that you have the energy to breathe. But respiration or breathing, this exchange of gases, is simply the O2-CO2 exchange with the atmosphere. Cell respiration is taking glucose or sugars and, in the presence of oxygen, giving off that CO2 and the water, like we mentioned before. So when we look at breathing and cell respiration, they are certainly interconnected. You have to bring in oxygen to your cells so they can do cell respiration. So the whole reason you breathe is to bring in oxygen to your cells so they can do cellular respiration. Your lungs will then breathe out CO2, which is the byproduct or waste product of this breakdown of sugars to store energy as ATP. Cell respiration is considered exergonic. Why? This is the formula for cell respiration. Why is it exergonic? Remember, exergonic means energy out, right? Well, you're getting energy out, ATP and heat. So this transfer of energy in food comes from the idea that your food is made up of calories, and calorie, actually with a big C on your nutrition labels, okay, is equivalent to a kilocalorie, or 1,000 little c calories. For those of you not in chemistry, we want to keep in mind that this is all based in a process that will allow us to actually burn food in a combustion chamber and look at the amount of calories or energy that are given off. It's actually done, if you're interested, in something known as a bomb calorimeter. So you put in your food and you literally burn it and see how much energy it gives off. And the amount of energy it gives off in the form of calories or kilocalories is looking at how much of that energy is required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. Okay, so on the side of our nutrition labels, when we look at calories, this 250 calories per half cup serving, what does that actually mean? Well, if it's 250 calories and 1 calorie is required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree C, kilogram is 2.2 pounds, right? My Ben & Jerry's ice cream down here is actually pretty full of calories, right? It's going to actually be able to release a lot of energy. But the problem is, how do we get your cells to store that energy effectively? You burn a lot of calories. So these are average calories burned in a 150-pound person running versus dancing versus sitting and writing. So yes, when you are taking notes, you are burning calories, just not quite at the same level. Now, these have subtracted out what we call BMR, or basal metabolic rate. So this is the amount of energy required to keep your vital functions going. So breathing, heartbeat, things like that. Okay? So just to give you kind of a sense. So how do the cells actually go through this process of converting energy? Well, we have to think back to what glucose looks like, right? It was our 6-carbon ring. It had some oxygens. And the idea that this transfer of energy by the breaking of bonds is what we're interested in. So we've got to break down this sugar ring 1 carbon bond at a time. Now, if you simply burn it, like we said, if you light sugar on fire, sugar plus fire equals flames, and heat and light. None of these things are potential energy for you. So we have to find a better way to do it. And the better way to do it is to break down very methodically, like we said, 1 carbon bond at a time, releasing small amounts of energy that we can hopefully capture and store as ATP, or potential cellular energy. Now, when we focus in on the cell respiration equation, we do have to look at who is gaining and who is losing electrons. So this is something known as a redox reaction, or a reduction oxidation reaction. And when we look at redox reactions, what we're really looking at is where electrons are coming from and going to. So if my green guy over here is giving up electrons to the orange guy, so we are subtracting a negative electron from this guy, and we're adding a negative electron to this guy, what's going to happen to our charges? This guy's orange guy on the right is picking up electrons. If you're adding negatives, what happens to the charge? Charge goes down, right? Becomes more negative. If you take away electrons from the left side, you have fewer negatives. If you have fewer negatives, the charge increases and becomes more positive. Why do I walk you through that? Because when we talk about redox reactions, the circle on the right would be reduced because it's picking up electrons. This is always very hard for students. If you are accepting electrons, you are reduced. That doesn't seem right. If you're accepting electrons, why are you reduced? Your charge is reduced. It's decreased, it's more negative. If you're giving up electrons, you become what we call oxidized. This is important to keep track of as we talk about these different reactions as we go.